Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I'm your host, Mark Roberti, the content marketing expert, bringing you 5 new episodes every week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. One of the things that we have to continue doing as entrepreneurs is to invest in ourselves. And that means through a lot of means like self-education or a monetary investment, basically things that grow our businesses and also grow ourselves. So that's why this episode is going to focus on how you can invest in your own capacity to thrive. Today's guest works with highly successful people to create deeply satisfying, vibrant, powerful, and intimate relationships as a life and business coach. She helps people live their lives with purpose and to invest in their capacities to thrive instead of just surviving. Today's guest for episode 166 of the Breakthrough Success Podcast is none other than Theora Moench. I definitely butchered that, didn't I?
It's totally fine. It's Mensch. It's a silent O, so it's a little bit of a curveball. I'm happy to be here.
Theora, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. I am definitely sorry about butchering that, but your last name, but it is really great to have you on the show. And before we talk about how we can invest in our capacity to thrive, I want to get some backstory on you. So why did you start to help people thrive?
Oh, that's a great question. I kind of had built a life that, I built the life that I thought I was supposed to build to achieve happiness, I was sort of headed down the white picket fence direction. And I found myself living a life that I felt very invisible and empty and unhappy in. And I don't know if you identify with this or if maybe some of your listeners identify with this, but I had a little bit of a quarter life crisis and unknowingly cleansed a lot of the things out of my life, like my relationship, my living situation, my job, because they weren't an authentic expression of who I am or what I'm on this planet to create. And one of the things that helped me make the transition out of those sort of unfulfilling achievements, if you will, was working with a life coach. And she definitely played a big role in my ability to navigate those changes as well as the ensuing depression, which was pretty all-consuming. And helped me come out the other side. And when I experienced the power of life coaching, both one-on-one as well as like in ecosystems like the Tony Robbins universe, when I was able to experience that transformation firsthand, it took about 9 months. But after about 9 months, I realized that was what I wanted to play that role for other people. And so I gave myself permission to start pursuing life coaching as a career, and here I am.
And I really love how this is about helping people, and this is something you saw. It had a very powerful impact on you. You just want to spread that, help people realize that they too can thrive. And some people, they have bigger capacities to thrive than others. I'm sure you could chime in on this, but I feel like the mindset has a really big impact on that. But I'm wondering, regardless of whether you're listening to the show right now, you feel like you have a big capacity to thrive, or you feel like you want to strengthen it a bit. How do we build up our capacity to thrive so we're not just surviving?
Oh, wonderful. It's very much about deciding to basically rewire what you believe and the way you think. And I think the best way to do that is consuming resources there's such a canon of exceptional personal development books out there. as well as I would highly encourage attending seminars or conferences. And my favorite, obviously, is working one-on-one with a life coach. That's definitely the best way to create quantum changes in your life. And in other words, it's about getting effective support and giving yourself self-educating and giving yourself permission to know that like the life you imagine for yourself when you're in the privacy of your own heart is something that you can create if you're willing to give yourself permission to be resourceful in a new way, in ways that you haven't necessarily explored yet. And you said people have different capacities. Some people are better or have more capacity to thrive, I think. And I would say that I think everybody has a really robust capacity to thrive, but it's more whether or not people will give themselves permission to. So what I see is not that like some people are better at some people are more like naturally inclined to create magnificent lives. It's that there are some people who are more dedicated and more, they're almost like a little bit more rebellious, and they're ready. They're hungry to disinherit whatever dysfunctions have been given to them by either social cues, culture, family, trauma, what have you. And they're more interested in being the engineers of their own living.
And when it comes to this capacity to thrive, some of us we all have the potential to have a lot of capacity to thrive. It's all a matter of tapping into it. And I feel like part of that is doing work that means a lot to us and having a big why behind what we're doing. But even if we have those things and a few other key things working for us, there are still some things that can hold us back, like bad habits, just to name one example. So how can we identify the things that are holding us back from living up to our capacity to thrive? So how do we identify them and then get rid of them from our lives?
Yeah. I mean, basically anything in your life that looks different from the way that you want it to needs a tune-up, So if your bank account looks different than the way you want it to, it's time to get curious. And again, it's so much easier with effective support. You can go faster, further, and have way more fun if you have effective support helping you. But, if your love life looks different than what you want it to, like there's something you're doing. There's some way that you're participating in it. There's some way you're thinking or believing that is blocking you from the abundance you really want. And so it's getting in there and asking higher quality questions. So instead of like, why me or instead of, and I don't know if you can hear that, but there's sort of like a victim tone to, the stuckness. It's like, well, what if I could rewrite this? What if I was in fact the architect? What if I am creating processes in my life that are uniquely designed to churn out these results? And if so, how can I change those processes?
And that's really interesting where you're not just pinpointing like, oh, this is a bad habit, this thing you're doing isn't right. It's more of like looking at the big picture and like anything that does not run congruent with the life that you've envisioned for yourself, and anything that is contrary to what you should be doing to reach this vision of yourself is something that you need to get rid of. And that's a very interesting way of identifying the things that could stand in our way from tapping into our capacity to thrive. And part of that capacity to thrive is having healthy relationships, especially with the people who mean the most to us in our lives. So how do you suggest we strengthen the relationships that we have?
Oh, is letting go of the myth that they just happen. So something I run into a lot is like, it's kind of crazy. One of the things we don't teach is like, we don't teach how to love healthily. We don't really teach how to create intimacy in a healthy way. And there's kind of this myth out there that, right, like good relationships just happen. And I'm far more of the camp that we are 100% accountable for co-creating a relationship, whether it's a business partnership, whether it's a friendship, whether it's an intimate relationship, and that requires a lot of exploration and a pretty and a powerful commitment to participating in it and owning what you can contribute and what you can affect. And like so much of that is like, I can't tell you how many people I will chat with. I do specialize a little bit in intimacy work. And so I've worked with couples before and, and I sit down, it's like, okay, like, what does your relationship stand for? And then we're like, what? It's like, well, yeah, you're creating this almost third entity that in which you reside as well as the other person. And what does that mean? What is its role on the planet, right? How are you committed to showing up for this beautiful third entity that I think is like a sacred expression of two people coming together? And you have to take into account, like, there's a human who's sitting across from the table from you, who's this unique cocktail of characteristics and history and lessons learned and desires and dreams and fears. And then you are your own unique cocktail of all those things. And you're basically trying to put these two people together and create extraordinary. And so, which I think is so possible, and I've seen it happen, and it requires a lot of intention, a lot of energy. I don't believe in sacrificial practices, so I don't really believe in sacrifice. I think that's comes from a scarcity mindset. But I've watched people where when you're willing to basically treat your relationship as a practice, the same way you might like yoga or gardening or your business, like something that you show up for and tend to on a daily basis, you can create pretty out of this world results.
And I really like that idea of not having any like thoughts of like the focus on being sacrificed or like anything negative. And just to paint a story for this, one of the things that I recently read is that when the bull in Wall Street was first put up, they were going to try and take it down. And then they kept it there. And they said that the guy also has to put a bear there to represent a bull in a bear market. But the guy said, I'm not going to do a bear because that's the negative side. So it even like in some cases, depending on the way you view something, you can see a negative side, but it's better to just cast that away, not think about that like sacrificial approach or anything like that, and just focus more on the positive and the good vibes over the negative stuff.
Yeah, and I think the one refinement I want to make is that it's not about ignoring the sacrifice. It's that if someone in the relationship is being asked to sacrifice, we've created a win-lose model, and I don't believe in win-lose models. I only believe in win-win. So if you want a thriving, robust relationship that is imbued with love and growth and all those amazing qualities, it requires that both people, or however many people are involved in that relationship, they also need to be thriving. And if one person is sacrificing, it probably means that communication is not happening at an intentional level. It usually means that there's some level of toxicity in the relationship, because it means that someone doesn't feel safe communicating what they need, or someone is asking of the other person something that they are not able to give, or they are not able to give freely and from their heart. So it's more about like, okay, if there's a need that needs to be met, and the way that we're approaching it is with some kind of sacrifice, is that's a very low frequency strategy. And both of you need to become more resourceful to figure out what is the way that we fulfill this strategy that comes from a place of abundance, as opposed to a place of us depleting one another.
And it's good that you clarified that. You pointed that out also, because the win-win relationship, it's important with any relationship you build, whether it's for business or whether it's the love of your life, or anyone who you build a relationship with, you should view it from a win-win because any like win-lose relationship, or even worse, a lose-lose relationship, those are not building, you're not building a healthy relationship. So maybe it may help you in the short run, but in the long run, you're missing out on a lot of opportunity, a lot of joy also, especially if you have a win-lose approach for the important people in your life. And going like this capacity that we have to thrive, like we have such potential, as I mentioned before, to really thrive and really tap into this capacity that we have. But we all have challenges throughout our journeys that at some point challenge our ability to expand our capacity to thrive. So, Theora, I'm wondering if you could share with us one challenge you faced on your journey and a powerful lesson you learned during that challenge.
Oh, yeah. So as I mentioned, I had put a lot of years and energy and sweat equity into building a certain kind of life. And when I had my sort of this is what I'm thinking, but for lack of a better term, my like come to Jesus moment and realized that I was creating a life that was going to make me miserable. In 4 months, I quit my job. I left my relationship of 3 years, which also meant losing the house and the dog and his whole family who I loved, and started going into pretty severe debt. My cat got run over. And I started experiencing suicidal thoughts all in about 4 months. And what had happened was I had ripped the carpet out from underneath me in such a severe and intense and rapid way that I didn't see a compelling future in front of myself. And without a compelling future, without the possibility of a future, that's where we crumble. And in some ways, I was the power of indulging my darkness was starting to take up more real estate in my mental landscape than the hope or possibility of like what could be. I was consuming all the personal development things, and I was even using what I was learning to beat myself up. Like, I know this stuff. Why can't I get myself out of this space that I'm in? And what ended up starting to pop me out of that space where I don't think I was actually suicidal, meaning I don't think that I would have ever, followed through with the thoughts I was having, but I was definitely scaring the shit out of myself. And what finally popped me out was I drove out to a nearby town and like bought this crappy bike off of Craigslist. And something that I had heard many times in the Tony Robbins conferences was action kills fear. And something that that comes up a lot in my coaching is that it's not about taking the perfect step forward or necessarily the right step forward. It's about just taking any action as long as it is forward, right? Like we can always course correct. But it was the analysis paralysis. So I'd kind of built a prison for myself and accidentally did this random thing. But it was like the first time I felt like I could breathe in probably 9 months. And so I think, that for me was like the profound lesson was that action, if you don't know what to do, it's fine. Just do something and you can build from there.
That's powerful. You mentioned how there's a time where you didn't have you didn't really see a bright future ahead, and for anyone who like doesn't see a bright future ahead, like, do you take action first, and as you take action the bright future emerges? Or did you have to sit down with yourself first, paint this bright future, and then start taking action?
No, for me, I didn't believe that there was a bright future at the time, right? I was so, and I mean, I was just very severely depressed, and I was abusing alcohol, and so, like I said, it was like, I mean, getting a crappy $60 bike off of Craigslist is not like part of some big, beautiful, like, I'm going to create this empire, you know, like it was like this. I mean, I think I was just kind of tired of being in my own darkness. And I know I've been swearing. Is it okay to swear?
Preferably not, but
okay. I was like, screw it. I'm gonna drive out. I'm just gonna go get this stupid bike. And it was the act of driving those 40 minutes to get this bike where I was able to get a little bit of purchase on my life. I was able to feel like I had a little bit of momentum and I could breathe for a little bit. But that wasn't like a step towards some amazing future. It was just I was doing something for me. And it allowed me to begin to kind of dust those cobwebs off. And started to kind of clear the path. And it took me another 4 months to come to say, maybe I want to be a life coach. So it wasn't necessarily immediate, but it was the start of opening up to a new way forward. And I would say even for the first 9 months of, maybe even 12 months of being a life coach, I was like, do I want to do this? Because I just had my own stories that I was working through, and now, I mean, I don't want to do anything else with my life. I absolutely love it.
And it basically started with a very small step where, like, just getting that bike from Craigslist, like, you wouldn't think too much of it, but it sparked enough hope where you were able to create that brighter future for yourself, just that one small action. And even like with plans, like, we do redirect all the time, we adjust. But when you're taking those initial actions, even if those aren't the actions that make you hit the end goal, they are moving you closer because you're taking action. And sometimes like you're unconsciously, by taking action, you eventually align yourself with another goal that is much better for you. And like in Theora's case, she's now a life coach. She's teaching a lot of people. She's obviously learning a lot herself. And with this idea of self-education in mind, Theora, I'm wondering if you could share with us 3 great books that you believe will have a positive impact on us.
Oh, okay. So for your everyday, very accessible, like owning your power more, I'm a big fan of Jen Sincero's You Are a Badass. It's such a easy read, and it's just all about reclaiming your power. And then as far as creating the kind of love and intimate relationships in your life, I'm a big fan of Intimate Communion by David Deida. And it talks a lot about navigating like the maturation of a relationship, what people of like whether or not people are socialized feminine or socialized masculine, it kind of bridges the gap of like what are the needs of those two identities, and like how to learn to speak your loved one's language, basically. And then what else? And then actually, as far as if this is one I recommend a lot to other coaches, but anybody that works in a relationship-based business, I would highly recommend The Prosperous Coach by Rich Litvin and Steve Chandler. And it's incredibly accessible. And I think for me, the takeaway is it's about giving yourself permission to try something. So if you're super intrigued or there's a lot of juice in an idea and you're like, maybe I could XYZ, it's for me, it was the book that really gave me permission to start where you are, instead of create this like mythical hand. Like there's a lot of us believe that there's this invisible mythical handbook of like the right way out there and other people have access to it. But for whatever reason, we didn't get a library card. And it's like the only right way is like start where you are, try things and feel like, and make it up. Like you get to make it up. You get to change your mind.
Theora, thank you for sharing those 3 great book recommendations. Those will all be on the show notes, markguberti.com/E166. And if you guys want a book on growing your content brand and generating revenue, my book, Content Marketing Secrets, is available. You can head over to markguberti.com/book if you want your copy. And before we wrap up this episode, I've asked Theora several questions throughout our time together, but what do you believe is one question that we need to be asking ourselves more often?
Me? One of my favorite questions is, how is this serving me?
That is I feel like that goes back to the idea where if something is contradictory towards the path you want to go, you do have to get rid of that if you want to achieve the results you want to achieve. So I really love that question. I feel like we should all be thinking about, like, each time we're doing something, how does this serve me? Because the better you serve yourself, the better you are able to serve others. So I really like that question and all the great insights also that you shared throughout our time together. And if you guys want to learn more about Theora, you can head over to her site, theoramoench.com. That will be in the show notes, but it's Theora, Theora, and then her last name, Moench. It's all one word, .com. And if you want to see if she's available as a life and business coach, just email her, info@theoramoench.com. That will also be in the show notes for anyone interested in her coaching so that they can thrive instead of just surviving. Theora, I cannot thank you enough for sharing all of your great insights throughout our time together. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Mark.
How does over 100 retweets per day sound to you? My free ebook, 27 Ways to Get More Retweets on Twitter, has you covered. I use the methods within this ebook to get over 10,000 retweets every single quarter. To learn more and get access to this free resource, visit markguberti.com/retweets.